The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Clarity, the Essence of Lean Management. I'd like to do a quick check because there's something funky going on my dashboard, and it looks like you may not be able to hear me yet. Could you please raise your hands using the little hand raising symbol and let me know if you can hear me? Oh, you can. All right, awesome. Yay. All right, I'm going to put you all down. I actually been using Zoom so much, I haven't used GoToWebinar in a few months, so I'm glad to know all is well. So I'm going to go ahead and put all the hands down. So welcome. I am so excited to be here. We actually have, I think I'm not sharing my webcam. There we go. We actually have people from 35 countries who've registered, and that is so exciting that we have that many people from across the globe here. So welcome to everyone. It's been quite a few months since I've had a webinar, and it's really good to be back. So let's just go ahead and dive into it. This subject, of course, is near and dear to my heart. I mean, you guys, some of you already have it, and some of you have read it already, but clarity first, it's actually like a lifelong project that I finally completed. And as I've been talking about the book and meeting with different people and working with clients, I've continued to be just almost riveted with the degree of clarity and what role it plays in organizational performance and personal performance as well, and what the degree of ambiguity does to drag people and organizations down. So I'm just really excited to be able to share some of my thoughts and some of my observations with you today. So, and then if anyone wants to share information about this webinar, there's one tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Central as well. So let's take it off. So The Outstanding Organization was my first hardcover book with McGraw-Hill, and in it I talk about these 4 conditions or 4 behaviors that need to be present in outstanding organizations or in outstanding performance of any sort, whether it's Olympic performance, musical acumen, any kind of excellence. Has these 4, the people involved have these 4 characteristics in place or conditions that they've established: clarity, focus, discipline, and engagement. And the clarity chapter, which was the first one of the 4 core chapters of the book, generated so much more emotion and interest and questions than any of the other chapters that I was like, oh, there's really something to this, where I'm hitting a nerve. And I even got an email from a kind of big burly engineer guy that I worked with and a client that really didn't express emotion much at all. And it was this very heartfelt email about how he actually cried a little bit reading the chapter because he finally understood the degree to with which his organization, his department was being dragged down by ambiguity, and how joyful he was about the possibility that clarity could be the freeing thing for them. And what I then learned as I started studying clarity and thinking it was going to be an easy book to write because it was one topic, no, clarity has a lot of layers to it. And it was a very difficult book to write. But as I started applying it and thinking about it more and more, I started realizing that, whoa, lean management is often very difficult to implement and deploy in an organization. And there are all kinds of reasons why. We've been theorizing for decades on why it's so hard. I actually think the main reason why is because every single lean practice has clarity at the core of it. It requires clarity, it stimulates clarity, and I think there's a lot of people that aren't so comfortable with clarity. And so if you start thinking about improvement of any sort, it doesn't even have to be using the lean approach. It could be Six Sigma, it could be anything. And you think about resistance, start looking at it through a clarity lens and start seeing if you start seeing some patterns where, wow, people really don't want to be clear on this because they're afraid. And so going back to what W. Edwards Deming said way back when, it's such a genius statement about removing fear, banish fear from the workplace. Absolutely. They are hand and parcel, that for people to seek clarity and to be comfortable with clarity, there has to be low, if not no fear. So that's kind of how this whole clarity first thing became a thing. So then And I started thinking about it. I started seeing ambiguity all over in life, like it's the, what is it called? The um, familiarity bias, where you start seeing, if you decide you're going to buy a white Audi, you suddenly see white Audis all over the place. So this was a couple of years back. I was writing the book, and I moved to back to Santa Monica, California. And I finally got my last box unpacked. I finally was going to the grocery store to get groceries, and I would circle the block about 4 times because I actually didn't see that there was an underground parking garage. It was a new store since I lived there the first time. And I finally found a space. I'm like, yay, a space. And I started to pull in, and I started looking at this was my real parking place. I looked at these signs. I'm like, wow, can I park here? I had to kind of figure out what day of the week was it, what time was it, but was there an exception? And, this was just like a classic, like, wow, the clarity just doesn't exist in a lot of places. And, it's in life altogether, in families, with friends, you name it. So here's the thing. Ambiguity is, you know, no ambiguity. Ambiguity complicates things. It slows everything down because you have to figure things out. You have to think more deeply, and it's hard thinking. And it's frustrating when you can't see through to clarity. And it's very expensive when you think about the amount of clarification that you have to do in the workplace because it's not clear to begin with. Then it's very expensive because people's time is money, labor costs. And so you have to hire more labor to handle all this ambiguity that people are spending their time with. And so it's very expensive. And the thing about the frustration part of it, I think, I want to go back to this. It's soul sapping to be around ambiguity. It's not fair. It's not respectful. And it's something that we have to just really take up our arms and go after ambiguity and knock it down and get more clarity in organizations. So take a look at your monitor, whatever kind of a screen you're looking at, and just write in the comments the questions. How many dots do you see? At a glance, how many dots do you see? Don't study it. At a glance, how many dots? Let's see what comes through in the question thing. Okay. All right, some of you are seeing the right number. So some of you may be looking on a small monitor, don't know. If you're on a large monitor, it's very difficult to see what's actually here. All right, good, there's some 4. All right, you're right, yes, there are 12. Yes, 8, 5 or 6, see? Some of you are not seeing the whole thing. Good, so here's the thing, the lattice work that you see here is like what we experience in organizations all the time. And again, in life, this is not just a work thing. It's the lattice work to me represents the ambiguity that is all around us all the time. And the beauty is that once you clear the ambiguity, voila, you can see so much more clearly, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's difficult to hear, even if it requires a lot of work to deal with the truth, it is the truth. And it is important to seek it. And sometimes you have to dig deeply for it, but it's worth it. So just in case you're interested, I hope you can all see this, but Akiyoshi Kitaoka is a professor in Japan that does these beautiful optical illusions, and he's all over social media, and if you Google him, it's just beautiful. Hopefully you can see that on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Akiyoshi Kitaoka. All right, so what is clarity? The way it took me a while to define how I view clarity, and I view it as having these 3 elements. Coherence, so things hang together. There's not something that makes you go, well, wait a minute, didn't they say? It doesn't have that. It's like everything is just coherent, and it's precise. So it's not vague and what ifs, and when we deal with clients, I just got off a client call about 45 minutes ago, and someone made a comment about, well, it's really big. I go, well, what's big? Well, it's a lot. Well, what's a lot? We use these fuzzy words, as I call them, a lot, and it's a habit that needs to be broken. You can help break it yourself by becoming more self-aware of what you're saying and how you're thinking. It's important to think about how we think, which is a practice known as meta, M-E-T-A, cognition. Google it, and it's fantastic. Once you quiet your mind, you're able to just bring up the ability to think about how you think, and you learn incredible things about your thought patterns and habits that you've got. So precision matters a lot. And then finally, elegance, ease. It's simpler. It's easier to get to, knowing what to do next. What does that person want you to do in the email? Do they want you to help? Do they want you to review? Do they want you to render an opinion? Do they want you to, what exactly does that person want you to do? Don't do it until you're clear on what the expectation is. You have a right as an information recipient to understand what the person is asking you to do so you don't waste your time and you're able to better serve them. As an information provider, same deal. You need to be able to think about your audience and think about how to deliver information coherently with precision and with elegance. It's an important trait and habit to adopt. So there are, I learned, 3 clarity types. There's the clarity pursuer, which is the place we should be trying to go to, where you as an information provider and information recipient, you're constantly pursuing clarity or delivering clarity. There is on the opposite end, the clarity avoider. And the clarity avoider, there are actually 3 types. One of them is pathological, and that's the intentional deceit, type 1. So the intentional deceit people are, oftentimes liars, sociopaths, all kinds of things, where they just really are not interested in sharing the truth. Then there's strategic ambiguity. Now, strategic ambiguity isn't always bad. It has to be very, very carefully used for very, very honorable reasons. Dishonorable reasons don't count. So, for example, let's just say that an organization's looking to acquire a company, or they're about to be acquired, or they're going to spin off part of the company or something like that. That's just not, especially if you're publicly traded, that's not information that you can afford to get out there before you're ready to tell the full story. I also noted strategic ambiguity can be helpful in improvement. For those of you that are leading improvement teams, and again, you don't want to just kind of say, oh, well, that was in the spirit of strategic ambiguity to justify being ambiguous. But there are times when a team hasn't thought through how a change is going to actually be designed and implemented. And so it's premature to even announce or suggest that there might be such a change, because people get all worried and they want to understand what the steps are and everything like that. And so sometimes it's better to withhold that until you have a more complete story to tell that it will make people feel comfortable. Willful ignorance is a really dangerous one. And, it's shocking how much of the time we do this, where it's kind of like that, la, 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 don't want to know, don't want to hear. And it's not helpful. I mean, it's much more helpful in life to know the truth, no matter how awful it is, than it is to not know for sure. And it wastes a lot of time, and it causes a lot of psychic energy to be expended in an area that's not very productive. So it's something to keep your eye out for. Clarity blind is pretty common for 2 reasons. Either type 1, they're just unaware that clarity is even something to pursue and to deliver, or they're aware but they can't perceive when they themselves aren't being clear or when others are being unclear. They're kind of used to it, like the fish in water. It doesn't say, oh, I'm in water, I'm in water. It's kind of that type of thing. So the more self-aware you become, the more you'll be able to catch both yourself, what you're doing, and also what people are saying or doing to you that kind of helps you see that you're not clear. And I do believe that anytime someone gives you a task at work to do, that until you're clear, you shouldn't do it. And go back and ask for that clarity, respectfully, of course. So the 2 traits that are the most important for seeking clarity and building a clarity-loving organization and clarity-inducing organization is humility and curiosity. So humility is the most important as far as not thinking you know something when you don't, and moving more and more into a data-based decision-making environment where pain, here's a really common example. Pain feels worse than pleasure. And so pain in a process, for example, will feel far more frequent than it is. So it's really important to have that humility and seek data, and don't leap to solutions, and don't think that you know when you don't. It's really important to break that habit. Curiosity is really interesting. Let's take a look. So when little kids are born, They are born these curious beings. It's natural. It's innate. Curiosity. Why, mommy? Why, daddy? That's one of the most common things little kids say. They're seeking all kinds of learning and information, and it's a beautiful thing. But what happens is we have, otherwise well-meaning parents who are just busy and they're working 2 jobs and they're stressed out and they come home and they've got no energy left and blah, 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 blah. And so they become impatient. And those why questions take a lot of effort to answer. So they start either putting very overt signals out there that it's not good to ask why, which is either yelling or punishment or eye rolling or whatever it might be, or it's more subtle. And it's almost more passive aggressive in a weird way, to tamp a little kid's curiosity down. So it's really important to try to foster an environment with little kids that allow them to get those questions answered, and that it's a good thing to ask those questions. It's viewed as a good thing. When it's not there, it does not feel good. And the more we get this kind of situation going on, the more we're habituating little kids into becoming adults that are now in your workplace, that or with your clients, that are now no longer feeling safe to be curious. So enter scientific problem solving. Now you've got all these people that are kind of tamped down around you that need their curiosity reignited. And so our role starts becoming, as leaders especially, reigniting that curiosity and making it safe to talk about things that are otherwise very uncomfortable to talk about, those crucial conversations, as they say. Now, society didn't help us any. What was the most famous saying? I don't know how many years ago this was, not most famous, but very famous saying, curiosity killed the cat. There's the cat on the gurney. That doesn't sound too good. I'm not sure that I want to be killed, so maybe I shouldn't be curious. And subtle, but important and common. That phrase was commonly uttered. Okay, adding to it, Curious George. Curious George is a book that so many people have read, especially as children. And what happened when Curious George was curious? He got into trouble. He had to be rescued by the man with the yellow hat and the yellow hat. And so, this again is subtle societal programming that is very, very important, that it's not good to be curious. But that's wrong. That is wrong, wrong, wrong. It is very good to be curious. And it's the only way to reach top performance, is to be very, very curious. So it's our jobs now, our mission, to create these curiosity-filled workplaces and homes and communities that will honor it. So what gets in our way also are cognitive biases. So there's now 180 identified cognitive biases, different cognitive biases that affect how we think. And so a bias is, thinking that things are a certain way, which they aren't necessarily. Thinking that there's way more white, Audi, way more white Audis on the road than there actually are, because you're sensitized to it. So biases are important because they kind of help us make sense of information a lot, but self-awareness, again, you need to become self-aware that you're operating with a bias so that you can then go and validate with facts. Are there really more white Audis on the road? Those kinds of things. And so that becomes very important. And that leads to this cousin, assumptions. So what does this say? Does it? Does not. So, because we fill in the gaps with history and experience, this is not a great thing, though, to do in life. I mean, you really need to validate as much as possible to know that you're on the right path. So, by the way, I just saw someone saying that they're not hearing audio. Are you guys hearing audio? Can you raise your hands again real quickly? Yep, okay. All right, good. Thank you. So I guess if I tell her to check her sound, that she won't be able to hear that. So I'll just have to let that go. All right, so now let's talk about the other big thing, fear. Fear in the workplace is a definite squasher of curiosity and therefore clarity. And so, fear becomes one of those things that people don't feel safe, raising issues and talking candidly about issues, it's going to be very difficult to get to a really high degree of clarity. So we've got, some organizational cultural work to do and leadership behavior work to do in order to really infuse an organization with clarity. So what as I'm thinking about lean practices and the, clarity kind of being at the core of them all, and thinking about how to organize the book, I broke it into the 5 Ps, which are purpose, priorities, process, performance, and problem solving. And I have some examples of each of these ways of thinking about clarity. So let's talk about purpose. So purpose is why an organization does what it does. It's typically very easy for an organization to answer what they do. What good or service do they provide? It's a little less easy, a little more difficult for an organization to answer the question, what do you really do? Meaning, what specific problem or problems are you solving for the customer? What's even more difficult, surprisingly or not, is why do you do it? Why? And so one of the things I talk about in the book is that if you go back to the original founders of an organization, that's often when you can get to what the true purpose was at the beginning, and it's often what the purpose still is. But sometimes because the organizations grow and they have all these different product lines and it gets complex, they just kind of lose that throughput line to why do we do what we do? And the reason why understanding why is so important isn't necessarily because of direct business performance results that come from clarity of that. It's because the decisions that you make around knowing the why are the better decisions, which then lead to great business performance. So it's better decision making and prioritization that stays you kind of in sync with what your true north really is why you're in business, or why the organization exists, if it's government or not-for-profit. And it's common that when you ask people why, they go back to product and they say, because we deliver blah, 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 or service. And it's not really that. It's why that and not something else. The other reason why is so important is when a new hire comes on board or someone's considering the organization for possible employment, having a why, a clear why, will make people either grab their heartstrings or it won't. And so, if you can get all the people in the organization passionate about the why, then you've got so much more energy and creative potential to create whatever you need to create that it's like, why would you not? So the why, this is one thing that people get confused about sometimes. They say, well, we need to find our why. You don't need to find your why. You need to mine your why. Mine it out. It's already there. It's just giving it light and making it clear to everyone what the why is. And mining is not necessarily easy, but you don't have to find it or make it up. It's already there. So priorities is the next one. So priorities trip up so many organizations, or the lack thereof, or too many. And there are so many things that we can work on in the course of a day, week, month, quarter, year, that we have to become way more selective and more courageous to say either no is a legitimate answer at times, but more important is not yet. It's a great idea, but not yet. We have these other priorities that we've got to wrap before we do that. Because if you don't, you're going to be guilty of task switching back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And when you switch a task, you automatically consume a lot more time and lose productivity. So it's like changeover in manufacturing, and changing a piece of equipment from one product to another. It's mental changeover. And so one of the things that when I was writing Clarity First, I learned about, actually this is before Clarity First, I learned about David Meyer's work at University of Michigan. He was a professor that studied engineers and studied how many times they switched projects in a day. And I believe it ended up being about 8 times a day. And that each switch averaged about 20 minutes of downtime, mental downtime, because they were switching and wrapping their minds around the next project. Those of you that have to or choose to switch tasks a lot know what we're talking about here. So it ends up, being mega hours a year that's lost because of switching back and forth. So if you do fewer at once, you're going to complete a lot more work in the same unit of time as if you're switching back and forth. There is no such thing as multitasking for cognitive tasks. So if you've got those job descriptions that say must be good at multitasking, please take them out, because you don't want people that are good at multitasking, especially since it doesn't exist for cognitive tasks. You want to prove this? Go to home tonight, turn on TV, or it may already be nighttime. Actually, for some of you, it's probably very, very, very late, and some of you, it's very early. Thank you, Australia. So the point is looking at a TV station with a ticker tape for financial station, news station, sports station, and a commentator, and try to absorb both. No can do. You can't do it. You can eat and watch TV at the same time. You can talk on your phone and drive at the same time. Not advisable, but you can. You can't absorb information, and projects and information at work are those. So what we want to do, a lean practice that helps enable the clarity that we need and also provides some good structure and discipline, is strategy deployment. Hoshin Kanri is the Japanese term for it. So it's a way to, usually on an annual basis, plan all of the work that needs to be done in order to move the organization closer to its strategy. So this assumes you've got a clear strategy, which is also very commonly not so clear. But the deployment is the execution part of strategy, and it's figuring out what to do now versus later that helps move the needle. And it's typically almost everything on a strategy deployment plan is typically tied to KPIs, key performance indicators, so you can see measurable progress towards some direction that you're heading in. It's there's a whole body of knowledge on this. We will eventually have a TKMG Academy course on strategy deployment. It's just in queue. We said not yet. We practiced what we preached and said not yet because we had other priorities, other courses to get out. So what happens? This is a real world example of what happens when you start practicing this kind of clarity about priorities, and it's across the organization. You get great alignment. This is an organization that had 24, projects that they wanted to complete in 1 year. And by doing fewer at once, the following year, they completed 73 of similar complexity with no additional resources. And they reported it was a lot more fun to do the work. It was a lot more easy to do the work. And they felt very strongly that the quality of what they did was far higher. So it's pretty powerful. I mean, 24 to 73 of similar projects, that's impressive. And it's not all that hard if you just learn how to say not yet and have clarity about priorities. Okay, process. So process is a biggie in that most processes other than manufacturing are fairly invisible. You can see service also. You can see, a restaurant operation. You can see a warehouse operation. You can see healthcare. You can see some of it. You can't see all of it. But processes you need to shine a light on processes in a big way in order to understand what the work is. In order to be able to improve the work, you have to understand what the work is to begin with. So value stream maps, many of you know that Mike Osterling and I co-authored a book that is called Value Stream Mapping, even though we tried to get the title to be Value Stream Transformation. So it's not about the map, it's about what happens as a result of the map. But this is a map, and it's a blueprint for understanding the current state and then making a design for the future state. And the beauty, this is one of the lean practices that has been the most profound for me, coming from the way back when, the TQM world, and now having this kind of clear tool to use. I actually don't think it's a tool, it's a practice. It's a practice of understanding how value is delivered to a customer or not, and how work flows or doesn't flow to a customer. It's profound. I've never, ever, we've never, ever as a firm had a client not go, wow, when we got done with a value stream mapping effort as part of the transformation cycle. So it's just, a whole complex system on one sheet of paper. And it helps people, especially helps people understand where they fit in relationship to delivering value to a customer, like the airport or the malls back when we could shop in malls. Remember those days pre-COVID? You are here. It's beautiful. It helps you set the context of everything around you so you can understand where to go. And that level of clarity is very, very powerful. So think about it. If you haven't used any value stream mapping yet, I recommend you try it out, but there's a certain way to do it. So we just launched 2 courses on it last 2 weeks ago. Or maybe 3 now. But if you want to be successful, there are certain things to do and not do in mapping. This is another thing that I love about value stream maps is the visual of how information flows or doesn't flow and the redundancy that exists and the lack of connectivity between different systems. It's super powerful for technology departments and technology CTOs, chief technology officers, to look at the reality of the current state. And this particular client got their projects funded like that after the CTO walked in on a briefing and said, oh my goodness, I had no idea. And each one of these lines emanating from a process block is redundant data entry. So it's huge. Standard work. So this is, how do you then roll out a process? So once you understand, that was a value stream, by the way. I skipped process level mapping, the swim lane maps. I feel like saying I got an app for that. The course is coming. It's being filmed next month, metrics-based process mapping. So we have a course for that. So standard work, we have a course for this too. Standard work, again, creates such clarity, especially for new hires, to understand how a process is actually executed. And standard work has all kinds of forms and shapes depending on the work. This happens to be, a flexible format that we recommend for work instructions, and then there's a plethora of job aids that accompany and augment the work instructions for how the work is done. So this is a job aid for a phlebotomy team that was having difficulty remembering which order the colored tubes should be drawn in so that they didn't contaminate and cross-contaminate the blood. And on the other side, actually the side that's showing here is for blood cultures. There's a certain way to sterilize the top of the blood culture tube. There's a certain way you treat a blood culture as you're drawing it, and then what you do with it right after, and all those things that it's a great error proofing, defect reducing technique. So that very, very helpful. Clarity, clarity, clarity about the work. Making problems visible has to also be incorporated into process design. So you have to think about, especially a lot of technology heavy processes, how do you make it more visually apparent that someone has entered something incorrectly or they've skipped a piece of information that's necessary? Technology allows you to not let people advance if they don't enter something. Technology also enables you to move from free text to drop-down menus. That doesn't eliminate errors, but it reduces them, and it allows you to report a lot more easily, so you have better data around the work. So it's just critical to be always thinking about what could happen, and how do I prevent it from happening? That's the first thing. And then if it does happen, how do I make it incredibly visible that it happened, so that we can not pass that defect or that error across the organization. Performance. So performance becomes a big deal. So everyone on this webinar right now, I'm sure, and everyone listening after it's recorded and it's later, has a favorite sport of some sort, or you've seen a sports team or something. So imagine going to your favorite sport and the scoreboard is blank for whatever reason. Electricity's out, it's just on the fritz, whatever it is. It's very unnerving to not have a clue what the score is, how much time is left, who's in the lead, who has the ball. It's just really difficult to enjoy it. And you're having to think and try to figure things out. It's a lot of work. So what you want to do is everybody needs to have some version of a scoreboard, scorecard, dashboard, you name it, that shows the key performance indicators that tell you if you're healthy or not. Like your dashboard of your car, do I have enough fuel to drive 20 miles or do I not? How am I doing on my pressure, my heat? It's all those things that we take for granted, but businesses are, in many cases, very, ambiguity abounds because of not knowing how you're actually performing and where you're at. This is an example of an executive level dashboard that has tiers below it that go all the way to the front lines. But it's just being very, very clear on what matters. These dashboards should have, in our view, no more than 9 metrics at an executive level, and at a frontline level, 2 to 5 that tie up to these. So tiered huddles within daily management systems allow you to kind of connect these metrics so that, again, you can go where you're trying to go. The target lines are the solid lines. It's where you want to go. The DMS board for daily management at the frontline level also has its own set of KPIs that are typically shorter term and more frequently measured, more actionable, more real time. It's very situational depending on the department, but yeah, we got a course for this too. All right, problem solving. Yep, we got a course for that too. So problem solving is, so one of the things that happened when I was writing Clarity First was on the heels of the outstanding organization, I had already formed a pretty strong opinion that PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act, the words weren't as clear as PDSA, Plan, Do, Study, Adjust, but it's still not really clear what is incorporated, for example, in P, plan. Like that sounds like you're just going to plan to execute something, but it's not what you do in PDSA. You are basically understanding the problem, deciding how big it is, deciding who's being harmed by that problem, or who's affected by it, and breaking the problem down. You can't eat an elephant all at once. You can't boil the ocean all at once. And then finally coming up with a hypothesis once you know the root cause or causes, in most cases, of the problem, a hypothesis that then leads to a countermeasure. And you say, like, we believe that if we do blah, 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 then we expect this to occur. And so it's a hypothesis, it's the end state of a P, Plan, Do, Study, Adjust, or Plan, Do, Check, Act. The D is an experiment, to experiment with the countermeasure or countermeasures that are being tried to see whether or not it actually solves the problem. And so it led me to a questions-based model that you can overlay on any of them. You can use it on DMAIC, you can use it on TVP, you can use it on 8D, you can use it on any scientific problem-solving methodology. You just layer these questions on, and they're not as linear as they look. And by the way, there's a handout, there's a PDF handout. Yep, there's a handout in the in your module for the control panel for the webinar. You'll see that there's a PDF of this that you can download. So this is not as linear as it looks. It's a little bit iterative. The more you know, the more you maybe have to go back and rethink and reframe previous steps and things like that. So it's an investigation in the early stages, and it's execution and reflection on the later stages. But this is, since we started using this with clients, it's really interesting how many clients, when given the choice of do they want Plan, Do, Study, Adjust, and that be the model we train, or do they want the questions, which we're totally fine either way. 95% choose the questions. But I map them to PDSA, DMAIC, or whatever, just so that they can see the connection between the two. We map them, not just me. Okay, A3 reports. So many of you are familiar with A3 reports. There's problem-solving A3s, there's proposal A3s, there's project progress A3s to show it. We use primarily problem-solving A3 reports, and primarily for the coaching benefits that they offer. So they do have multiple purposes, but boy, talk about getting clear about what a problem actually is, how big it actually is, who's affected by it, what are the problem components, what are the percentages. It's data-based. It's on 11 by 17 sheet of paper, or an A3, the rest of the world calls it. It's just so clarifying. And people that use it successfully, it has to be highly visual. There should be very few words. In fact, I could, critique this one and say, that these certain things should be made into visuals. But the teams start out and they make progress and they get better and better at writing A3 reports. They're oh, it's a word. They're done real time at the time that you're solving. It's not something you use to document something that already happened. Contemporaneous? I'm blanking on the word. Anyway, you know what I mean. Real time. And one of the most important things, I love this dog, one of the most important things is to help leaders learn not to have their eyes closed. So, leader standard work, yeah, we got a course for that. Leader standard work is the way to help leaders really embrace seeing and learning and not being afraid of it. And one of the most important practices is going to the Gemba. Or if you don't want to use Japanese, you could say it's going and seeing. And so getting out of offices, of course, it's a whole different thing with COVID because many people aren't in their offices, but we will get back eventually. And going and seeing applies virtually very much as well. There's all kinds of ways to go and see virtually with video cameras, with still shots that are taken if you can't get into one area. There is some new technology, the Google Glass, the glasses is a technology you can use. There's a couple of other new technologies where you can go and see that's not AI. It's more reality, artificial reality based. But anyway, there's all kinds of ways you can go and see. So this practice of getting leaders out of their offices and going and seeing on a very regular basis is one of the most clarifying activities they'll ever do. And it's a beautiful thing when they start doing it. And they love it once they start. It's getting them in the habit of doing it that's a little tricky at times, and finding the time to do it. So where do you fit into all this? Basically, clarity always starts with you. And, as I said in the beginning, I believe that you have a responsibility to help others become clearer by asking clarifying questions. You have a right to ask clarifying questions and be given the gift of clarity. And it is a gift. There's so much ambiguity out there. It's like, wow, that was easy. It was clear. It's a gift. And there's just, so much that you can do to be more aware of how you're receiving information and how you're processing it, and then how you're delivering information. And, I don't talk about this a whole lot, but I do think it's really important for everyone to have something they do to quiet their minds. And once you learn to quiet your mind, you actually learn to control your mind. And once you learn to control your mind, then you can be much, much more aware of everything that you're doing, because you can direct your attention to what you're doing and to learn more about how you're interacting with the world and how your mind is affecting how you interact with the world. So clarity does begin with you. It affects every piece of work and life. And at the very least, the one thing you could do to start this process is to take clarity pauses before you hit send. Make sure your intent is clear. First sentence of the email, what do you want the person to do with what you're about to say? Take a pause before you pick up the phone. What's the purpose of this call? What do I want to achieve in this call? Before you walk into a meeting, actually, while you're planning the meeting, you need a written agenda. What is the purpose of this meeting? Why does everyone need to take their time to come to this meeting? What is the purpose of this organization? What is the purpose of this process? All of those clarifying questions can help you really soar with performance. So these are all lean management practices. They all require clarity, and they all create clarity. So clarity is kind of at the core of all this, and clarity begins with you deciding that you want to operate this way, and talk to colleagues, talk to leaders, talk to everyone you can, and see if you can get a critical mass to say, yep, we're going to operate with clarity, and see what happens. So that is all I had, and there are lots of questions that came in during the actual registration process that I want to go to. Feel free to connect up with me on LinkedIn, Twitter. We've got Facebook also. I just ran out of space here. Visit us on the Academy website or on tkmg.com. The webinar will be posted on tkmg.com on our webinar page, and I'm ready to entertain your questions. So, all right. So starting with, let's see, how much time do we have? Oh, this is good. We've got 15 minutes. That's a rarity that I allow that much. That's good. All right, what does DMS stand for again? Daily Management System. So sometimes you hear tiered huddles. Tiered huddles is one part of DMS, but it's only one part of DMS. And one thing that I'll just give you a quick, you might not want to look at this because it's going to make your eyes crazy. I'm going to go up. I just want to point out one thing. Where is that? Here we go. I want to point out this area readiness section. So we go through each of these sections in the DMS course and what you do with them, but just as a high level view, you see that there's a category here that we name TIPS, technology, information, process, people, and supplies. This section is done at the beginning of every shift or day, if it's only an 8 to 5 operation, to see, are we ready? Are we ready to do the work for the day? Do we have all the technology we need? Is it functioning properly? Do we have all the information we need? Are our processes working well? Do we have the right number of people and the right types of people? And do we have all the supplies we need? And you can make those categories whatever is relevant for your workplace, but this is a relatively new addition to how we roll out DMS at clients. I would say within 4 years. Before that, I didn't even know area readiness was a thing. And it was really talking with a couple people from some auto parts manufacturers that brought this to light. And one of the guys on our team that was a new ad had a lot of experience with area readiness. And I was like, wow, that I was doubtful that it was that powerful. He sold it really powerful. And I was so wrong. It is very powerful. So if you aren't using area readiness, I recommend you do. Daily management systems. It has different names too. All right, so let me go back to this, and now next question. Tips for what? TIPPS, is that what you're asking? Technology, information, process, people, and supplies was the acronym. Okay, let's see. Let me go back up here. When we have 3 value streams working in parallel, and please go ahead and ask your questions. Go ahead, and you can also raise your hand. I'm going to put all the hands down now from before. You can always raise your hand, and I'll unmute you. That would be kind of fun to be able to talk voice to voice. So when we have 3 value streams working in parallel, and all of them serves different purposes, like one is saving money, one is making money, and the third is increasing brand reputation, how can we do prioritization and get clarity as a portfolio in that case? I think one answer is that it starts with how are you actually performing currently in each of those? And where do you need to be or want to be performing in each of those? And then you don't necessarily choose the largest gap first, but it certainly gives you an indicator of, where you have the greatest pain between where you are and where you would like to be. But the reason why I say you don't necessarily take the largest gap first, if the largest gap is in part of the organization or requires involvement of part of the organization that is completely slammed with something else, it may not be the right time to start with them. If they have highly resistant leadership, you may need to grease the skids, as we call it, for a while, like warm them up to the idea before you go there. So there are different prioritization criteria you can use for which one do you work on first. I would say, where's the greatest pain? I mean, that's the one question we ask all the time. Where does it hurt? Like Dr. K is here. Where does it hurt? And it's usually a pretty clear indicator. But again, where it hurts the most may not be where you start first, because you have to factor in readiness, bandwidth, politics, difficulty, all of those things. Varun, please let me know if that answered your question and if you have any follow-up questions. Are your value streams the basis of clarity? Do I think they should be the basis of clarity? Yes. Are they in many organizations we work with? No. Do I think you have to have clear value stream definitions in order to have high degrees of clarity? No, but it sure helps. It's like my health's a little bit better with vitamins because I don't eat maybe all my vegetables the way I should. It certainly is a boost, a big boost to clarity. Can you exist without it? I did a whole lot of organizational design and development and managing departments, lots of them, before I ever knew about value stream, the concept or mapping. So, and I think they did pretty well. So I don't think it's necessary, but boy, does it help. It's powerful. Okay, let's see. Are there any hands up? Let's see. Let me go back up. Okay, I don't see any hands, so I'm going to wait and see if there are any more questions. Okay, next question. Do you have any suggestions on how to present the concept of doing less at once or result in getting done so I can get buy-in. Yes, I was going to do it actually, but sometimes it's hard to do virtually. So here's what I do. It's a simple little exercise. You have people draw 2 lines and then 2 more lines. So 4 lines altogether. There's going to be round 1 and round 2. And so actually, I'm sorry, 1 line for round 1, 1 line for round 2. There's 2 tasks that they need to do. One task is write a very brief sentence. I happen to use focus reduces chaos. And then you have another task that's the number of letters in that sentence. It happens to be 17 for focus reduces chaos. So those are the 2 tasks you give them to do. They get a timer, stopwatch going, and you say ready, set, go. And they time themselves task switching. So they put a letter and then the corresponding number. F1, I'm sorry, yeah, F1, 0, 2, C3, U4, S5. So focus reduces chaos, and the numbers 1 through 17, but they're switching back and forth to complete those tasks. Time it. It's usually anywhere from 25 to 45, 50 seconds for them to do that. And then you have them do it with no switching. And you have them just write the sentence and just write 1 through 17, and it's usually half the time. And it's pretty powerful. They also report it's a lot easier doing the second round because they're not having to think back and forth, and they make fewer mistakes. Yes, people actually make mistakes on sentence focus reduces chaos and 1 through 17. And it's more joyful work. And why shouldn't work be joyful? So it's a great little task or great little test. Oh, so you had your hand up, Kyle. Hang on, I can unmute you. I'd love to unmute you. Do you have another question? Let's see. Let me find Kyle. It's a long list. It's good. All right, Kyle, I'm unmuting you. Oh, it says that you're self-muted. So I don't know if I can unmute you.
Oh, cool. Test.
I can't. Oh, there you go. Hi, Kyle.
How's it going?
Kyle?
Just want to say, first of all,
Kyle, I can't hear you.
You can't hear me? Hello,
Kyle,
test.
I can't hear you.
Test.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't hear you at all. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead and oh, you can hear him. Well, that's interesting. Hang on. Aha. Let's try it again, Kyle. Come on, Kyle, try it. Can I hear you now?
Hello?
Yay! Hi! It was setting to my headphones, which I had on earlier. Sorry about that.
It's gonna make an awkward recording. Hey, how's it going?
How are you?
Anyways, so first of all, I've read a lot of your books, great stuff, and I had a question specifically about A3s.
Yes.
So I recently joined a larger department, and consider the traditional waterfall monolith that's fragile turning agile, and they have this confluence that they keep project documentation in.
Okay.
But you end up with this weird thing over time that's preventing me from adopting like an A3 or X matrix model with Hoshin Conry, where everyone is adding their own pages at will, which is important because it helps new people ramp up and the like. But if someone adds a page, like if I added a page and I quit the company, the next person after has no idea anything about what I'm doing in the context of is this page needed? Is this something I should be thinking about? And the question is, what are the general steps to start spring cleaning for very monolithic project documentation?
Good question. So I think it always starts with setting criteria for what gets in there in the first place, and then setting the criteria when you already have a Michigas situation on your hands. It would lead you to what do you get rid of and how do you reorganize and those types of things. So criteria is really important. And people are well intended. I mean, people aren't. This is the thing that's important to remember, that people are never the problem. The problem is process and work systems. And so without any guardrails and criteria for doing anything for that matter, you can get a mess on your hands. And so I don't know if that helps, but just like how should it be done? What should be in there? Does that make sense? Kyle?
It sort of does,
Okay.
but at the same time, I'm not sure if the people like one of the things about this presentation was the lack of direction towards steps to do, and don't take work until you understand the clear boundaries of what needs to be done. And it's hard to apply that to this because a lot of the people who've created these documentation have left, and then the people that are running the show don't have the confidence to determine which documents need to be there because they can't see what is important down low, and people down low can't determine what the top needs. So it's trying to like build that bridge.
Yeah, so I mean, all of these different activities need to be cross-functional and cross-hierarchical. You can't just have like one person deciding anything. It needs to be team-based. And if the people that I mean, I guess if there's people that left and no one knows anything about how they did what they did and why it's there and everything like that, you could do an experiment and just get rid of the documentation and see if anyone notices or needs it. I mean, it's what we do with report generation all the time. When people have like 9 million reports, sometimes say, could you just turn it off and see if anyone squawks? And that tells you right there if it's needed. So that's, I mean, it's a little controversial style, but I don't know. It's hard to give a specific answer to that unless I understood a little bit more about what exactly is on these documents.
Thank you.
So I'm sorry, I can't be any more help. But that, hopefully the criteria part of it is really important. Okay, thank you. I'm going to put, Mike, do you want to be unmuted? I think you do. Mike, I'm going to put Kyle's hand down. Mike, I'm going to unmute you. It's not letting me unmute you. You're self-muted. It won't let me unmute you, so I think you have to do it on your end. Okay, next question. I've been documenting swim lane-based process maps for the past 15 years, so I'm pretty good at workshop facilitation and process documentation. But I never facilitated or documented a value stream map. I'd like to document value stream maps at some point one of my clients. With zero experience in facilitating or documenting value stream mapping, but being an expert at swim lane process mapping, I'm curious what kind of challenges do you think you'd face in documenting my first value stream map, and how do I overcome it? Oh my, that is a very big question. And I mean, you got to learn how to do it. It's very different from process level mapping on many, many, many levels. The team is different. They're more leaders than doers. The way you chunk work together is much more macro than micro. The layout is more visual. The way you go about thinking about future state is conceptual and strategic, not tactical. There's just a whole lot. I don't know whether you've read value stream mapping or taken the 2 courses we just released, but I mean, both of them have good information. The courses have new information that's not in the book, but the book, they're 2 different learning mediums. The other thing about the courses is that it has a lot of animation, so there's a lot more visual to it than what the book. But the book, is something you can take to a coffee house. Well, our coffee houses are open in Dallas. You can take it, somewhere and easily read it and all that stuff. So there are 2 different mediums, and I think you get different benefits of each one of those. So it's very different on multiple levels. Okay, let's see. Here's another one. Oh, she left. Shoot. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else coming in. Okay, for standard work, I work in healthcare. How have you seen standard work differentiated from work instructions? My manufacturing background says standard work is for improvement and analysis, and work instructions are for training. Okay, well, here's what we do. We have a big umbrella of standard work that is the big label. Within it are work instructions or job instructions and job aids. So this is step by step, 1, 2, 3, 4, who does what, and if you want to include metrics and tact time in there, if it's relevant for the process, it's in there. The job aids are more, a lot of times we use them for quality output, what to do, what not to do. The work instructions are visual, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's very clear visuals for the steps, but the job aid can be reminders, checklists, memory joggers, pictures of, like a lot of up close pictures of what something should look like versus what it should not. Those types of things is how we differentiate. Standard work, the problem with standard work we see lots of problems with standard work. First of all, the lack thereof. Second of all, if it's there, it's not current, or if it's there, it's written with just a bunch of words in the old SOP style, standard operating procedure style, and no one uses it. And then if you get it really, really good, the journey is not stopped by any means. It's managing it. It's updating it. It's continuously improving based on it. It's a very living document kind of thing. And that's what most organizations struggle with if they don't have us nagging at them for a while till they build the habit. So, healthcare needs work instructions for every single key process, just like everybody else does. I hope that answered it. And let me know if I didn't, and I will give you a little bit more. Let's see. Karen, is it possible to start a clarity journey with the shop? Oh, it's 4 o'clock. Okay, one more quick one for my time. Is it possible to start a clarity journey with the shop floor, or is it mandatory to start top-down, board of director, top managers? I think it's worth a conversation with leaders about the need and give them some evidence of the need and see if they buy into it, because the vibe of an organization rolls down from the top. It always has, always will. And if the vibe of the leadership team is like, la, 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 we don't want to know, don't speak, it's going to be very difficult to do it at a local level. You can try it, and you'll probably make some progress that makes it a little easier for that local part of the organization. But, if you can get up to the top and talk about this and see if you can get their buy-in to what it gives you from a performance perspective, that's the place to start. But don't do it. Don't do it just because you can't get to the senior most leaders. You can improve work a lot by just infusing clarity where you can at a local level. All right, so that ends our webinar. Again, there's another one tomorrow morning, same webinar, from 9 to 10 if you want to pass the word to some friends and colleagues. And I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm just really high on clarity, and I just see the tremendous liberation that it generates and the boost in performance that comes along with that liberation. So I hope you experiment with it, connect with me, let's talk, I'd love to hear your stories. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good evening, day, or morning, wherever you are, or night. Sweet dreams for some of you. Bye-bye.